Good evening and welcome everybody out there on YouTube. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Emily Gray, Exec Director of Mercury Musical Developments, here with my colleague Ellen from MMD and MTN, and a very lovely panel. Thank you so much, panelists, for being here. And this panel discussion is part of a series we, about a month ago, had a discussion, really lovely, productive discussion around creating a digital pitch. And I know people who were there at that, or both panelists and audience, found some really helpful practical tips. So that was all about making the pitch, creating it for your new musical. This panel is much more about how you then get it out there into the world. And so we have experts here on this side. I'm not a great expert myself, so I'm aiming to learn quite a lot and to help with asking questions. And audience out there, please do ask questions to our lovely panelists. We're going to have a chat for a bit and then we'll open up for questions. And the idea is, yes, that we all get to learn a bit and discuss a bit. And we know there's not one size fits all. So that whole idea of what's going to suit you and your work, you know your work best. But hopefully you'll pick up hints and tips here about how you can share it with the world. So I'm going to hand over to Ellen and hope we have a lovely discussion. Thank you for coming.
Hello everyone, my name is Ellen and I'm the membership manager. I'm the membership communications manager for both Musical Theatre Network and Mercury Musicals. And my frowny face was just checking that we are still live. We are still live. I don't know if we lost the feed there for a moment, but if not, welcome back, we're here. A little bit of housekeeping as we begin, that if you would like to ask a question of the panel, we just ask that you put question in capitals at the start of that. And then the wonderful James Hadley from Musical Theatre Network is kind of in the shadows passing the questions from us, from you to us. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce our experts tonight, starting with Hayden from the Digital Culture Network of the Arts Council and so many other things. If you'd like to introduce yourself, Hayden, and tell us your things.
I lost my voice for a sec there. Hi everybody, my name's Hayden. I am the social media tech champion for the Digital Culture Network. So I've been working with arts and culture organizations for the last probably 2.5 years now. So I have lots of experience with social media campaigns and strategies for large or small or individual practitioners.
Fantastic. And we had Hayden on a panel last year at the start of the pandemic where he shared his wisdom again about adapting to the digital space. So thank you so much for rejoining us. Hello to Rachel.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Bit about me. I am a freelance marketeer. I've been working in the industry for almost 10 years. I've worked on a range of things. I specialize in campaign creation, management, implementation, and evaluation. I've worked on musicals. I worked on Cruel Intentions, the musical that went to the Edinburgh Fringe, which was a lot of fun. And I've also worked across a range of circus, family theatre, straight theatre, spoken word, anything you can put on a stage. I've probably done some marketing for it. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to chatting to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. And last but definitely not least, Jamie.
Hey, yeah, I'm Jamie. I've been working as a producer for the past about 10 years. I was the originating producer at the Barn Theatre, and I was there for about 3 years before COVID hit. Prior to that, I was a freelancer doing fringe stuff all the way up to large UK and international tours. But most recently, I did Death Drop at the Garrick Theatre, which I co-produced with Trafalgar Entertainment and Tuck Shop. And now I'm currently producing Wonderville at the Palace Theatre until the end of August.
Wonderful, thank you so much. A lovely range of skills and experience here. So I'm wondering if we could start on the almost on the kind of technical side of going, you know, you've got your pitch, you've made your pitch. Where do you begin? What's a good starting point in terms of going, right, where am I going to upload it? Where's it going to go in this world? There is so much choice. How do you begin on that? Who'd like to start us off? Have we got somebody? I was looking to Hayden. Would you start us off, Hayden?
For me, it will come down to what you're trying to achieve. So you really need to think about what your objective is, who your audience is, who you're trying to attract when you're going out into the world. There's so many different, from a social media point of view, there's so many different platforms, and so many different ways that you can connect with audiences, but there's also lots of different ways what you can gauge success by. So it might not necessarily be success. The success for you might be the right people seeing it, and that might be 5 or 10 people seeing it. Success for you might be you want who's loads of numbers or loads of engagement or loads of views, impressions, etc. So it's about you really knowing your exact reason for going online, your exact reason for putting the work online, and what your definition of success is.
Perhaps we roll back here for a moment, because I know that Rachel's done a lot of work in campaigns and Jamie with his producer hat on. Once you have a digital pitch, what advice do you have about working out who the right people are to put it in front of them, determining those objectives so you can then determine your channels and where you pop it? Anyone?
Rachel?
Okay. You don't get the same cues as you do in person on Zoom. You have to do this a lot. I think it's about, for me, it's about kind of what your personality is, in terms of what your brand is, what your pitch is, and creating something that feels really organic to you from there. So if you have, I don't know, something that you really want to have in very specific off-West End spaces, then how you present yourself has to reflect that. So you would create quite a different feel of, say, website or social media channels, as opposed to if you were going down kind of, say, a really West End commercial route. I think separating those objectives is really important. I think it's about finding that personality, thinking about where you want to see your work, and kind of working backwards from there. So say the aim is, in 2 years' time, I want to have a 4-week run at Park Theatre in the Park 200 space. Let's work our way back from there. How do we reach that objective? And allow yourself to appreciate the little wins. So you set up your remote social media account and you scheduled a whole week's worth of social media. Amazing. That takes hours. Well done. Celebrate that, and just, kind of make sure you're always being authentic to your product, but also to yourself as well. Hope that's helpful.
And Jamie, did you have anything to add there in that space, or Hayden, about how you harness the kind of authenticity and you find your originality, and then where do you put it? How do you get it to the right people?
Yeah, it's exactly what Rachel said. It's about a journey. It's about figuring out, when you put on a show to begin with, you always need to think of the what ifs, about what's going to happen next at each stage, up until the final stage of, look, this is the end goal. And the key element about that is figuring out what that end goal is, and then taking those stepping stones to it. But it's about branding. It's about making sure that you have that linear line through it, so people understand that even if the budget is starting with £100 and all you've got is a sketch on a piece of paper, when it does grow and grow and grow and grow and grow, it's still relatable all the way through. So you carry that audience with you. You sort of keep thinking that message, because otherwise, if you keep rebranding or each stepping stone forget the last step, you're going to lose that audience. So you need to build and build and build. So yeah, it's definitely about thinking, and that journey can be 20 years time. It doesn't, just because you say, look, I want to be on Broadway, anyone can say that, or I want it to be a feature film. Nothing is unrealistic. It's about saying, look, I want to have a feature film, but fine, that might be 20 years time, it might be a year's time, depending on the journey of the piece. But don't rush it, build it, brand it correctly, and then you get geniuses like Rachel and Hayden doing it correctly, and working, literally, you work with people like this who are geniuses in their field, who bring it to the forefront and make sure that people like me don't screw it up and forget the audience that we've already touched base with.
I would just jump on that and say that actually one of the most rewarding things is taking somebody from the very beginning of your journey and your story right through to the end with you. In terms of marketing, there's no better feeling than knowing that somebody saw that first sketch that you posted as an ad with £100 behind it, and now they're seeing your feature film. Yeah. There's no better feeling. It's about its consistency and audience retention all the way through. It's so much cheaper to retain an audience member than find a new one.
It's like following it's like going to that gig in your corner pub and that band that nobody's ever heard of, and then you see them 10 years time on the stage at Wembley. you're proud to have followed them and supported them through that journey. So it's about keeping them there because they want that audience want to be there with you.
From a practical point of view, always, if you can, try and create a social media vision or a vision for what it is you want your narrative to be online. So if you just create a paragraph that says this is what I want to be, this is what I want to represent, this is the story I want to tell, that will be like your foundation, your grounding, so that whenever you feel like you're maybe laminating or talking about topics that aren't quite relevant to you, you can always come back to this, so that you're keeping that consistency in that narrative. There's a social media guru, influencer, whatever you want to call them these days, who actually named Phoebe Parks, and she always says it, and a lot of people say it, you don't have to necessarily be the best at social media, you just have to be the most consistent. So if you can be consistent in your narrative, be consistent in your story building, be consistent in thinking about the content that you're creating to tell your story, the same way you've produced this musical, it's your story. So think about how can you get out the best parts of your story, how can you amplify the parts of your story that you want to tell the most and that you're happy and that relate most to whatever your project is or whoever you are as a person.
It's wonderful advice. Thank you so much already. That sense of authenticity, consistency, knowing what it is that you've got and what you want to do with it. I guess it's with the digital pitches we're creating at the moment with different teams, we've got we'll be creating a kind of longer pitch, like a sort of 7-8 minutes. We'll have a couple of songs, we'll have a 1-minute kind of elevator pitch. And I'm just wondering if I'm interested in this thing about the storytelling and the kind of drip feeding, and I guess it's going to be down to each project, but I don't know if there's in that, I think it's quite hard to work in that sense of a campaign over time, because it's so, particularly in the world as we have it at the moment, things are so insecure and unsure. And I just know if you've got some advice there on how you kind of start to set up that journey or that story.
I think, again, it's the planning side of things. Social media, well, I'm talking from a social media perspective, and maybe that kind of, social media is 90% planning, literally. Like the majority of it is how can you plan out what you're planning to do. So maybe if you can use the editorial calendar, so where you say, okay, and you plan for a quarter, so you say for this quarter, I know I always do January to March because it's easy for me. So there's Valentine's Day, International Women's Day, Chinese New Year, there's loads of different events, the topics that might be relevant to you or your communities that you're talking to, that you can say, okay, I can plan content around this. Then you can say, what stories what content can I create on a regular basis that my audience engages with? And so it doesn't have to be, it's not something that you can't do easily, something that you can do easily and that you can produce regularly and that your audience engages with. So that can be a provocation, that can be a question, that can be a behind the scenes, that can be a monologue practice, that could be you singing an element of the musical, that could be, there's so many different ways you can metaphorically skin a cat. So yeah, that's the way that you can start to think about it.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Any other thoughts on that, Rachel?
Yeah, I would probably add to think about the fact that different people are going to engage with your content in different ways. So Hayden, social media expert, knows more than I ever will. But I work generally kind of more broadly across, say, bulk emails, which is, again, it's a digital product. You've got websites, you've got all these, you've got ad placements, you've got all these different tools. It's about thinking about, again, it's what do you want to achieve from putting X into X. So, for example, somebody is going to approach reading an email that you've sent them in a very different way to scrolling through Instagram 10 minutes before they go to bed. So it's about thinking about what time is that audience member going to commit to reading what you've written or watching what you've given them. So I'd say social media, if it's video content, keep it shorter. You can go a bit more long form on email. Just really think about the different assets you might need and not just posting the same assets across all channels at the same time, because people will just switch off.
Yeah, it's touch points. At the end of the day, it's get as many touch points in as you can, and different touch points, because if people get bored quick. So if you start showing the same video on every platform, on every mail out, on every merge, on everything, people are just going to say, oh, well, I've seen that. But it doesn't mean you can't use clip-ins of the same video. You can cut it, you can switch it, you can change it, change music, do whatever you want to, change the dialogue within that piece. So it's advertised to different audiences, because you might not have just one audience. You might have teenage girls between 12 and 19, but you might also have, for some reason, an older male audience between 45 and 65. So you need to make sure that you're engaging with all the audiences that your marketing team have suggested on the content that you've got on your show, because there's no point. For instance, we're doing when we did Death Drop, there was no point if people weren't interested in drag queens and kings and the LGBTQ+ community. That's going to fall on deaf ears. So we needed to make sure that when we were doing the marketing on that, it was going in the right direction and to the right people, and having those touch points reflecting that audience. So it's just figuring out, and like I said, it's you follow the lead of your marketing and PR department on that, and listen to them, because they are your biggest handheld and guide, and they know better than you. Like, it doesn't, like, your marketing and PR are the things that hold up your show, and the thing that gets people through that door and helps it get that next life.
I would say, just to follow up on what Jamie's saying, that a lot of marketing is reading stats and actually figuring out that, so yes, in the beginning of a pitch, we could say, we think this is going to appeal to 12 to 19-year-old girls and men 45 to, was it 65?
Yeah,
and we could, what show is this?
We'll make it, don't you worry, Rachel.
Yeah, great. And we could actually start doing a load of advertising in different channels, and it comes back and actually we pitched it entirely wrong, because it's women aged 30 living in a very specific postcode who are interested. And so at that point, we tell the producer, we tell you guys, and we go, something's a bit off here. This isn't what we thought. So we need to rethink about it and actually figure out, what is it that those audiences, those 30-year-old women in postcode N4 are really interested in? Like, what is it that's getting to them, and how do we start creating more content for them? Because then we can expand upon them. I don't want to shout into an empty void. If the teenage girls aren't interested, I'm probably just going to kind of go, all right, that's fine. Who is interested? Let's really use that.
Yeah. Prefer not to shout if you don't have to. You want to try and have that two-way dialogue with the social, so there is a social element in that side of things. But that all of those points are very true. I believe in benchmarking. I'm a very big benchmark person, and especially when it comes to looking at data and stuff like that. So if possible, if you can have an understanding of your data, like Rachel touched on, and you understand, and you'll have an understanding of what your audience looks like, or the audience you're trying to go for before, that will hopefully save you that time and those issues of having to appeal to different audiences and being so far wrong from each time you go through. So you can have an understanding of your data, and understanding of your audiences, the understanding of your stories. And again, it comes to, you tell such great stories when you're on show or on production or on fit. It's exactly the same thing. You're now thinking, how do I tell these stories, but on a different platform, in a different format? So just think about how you can share your story, and then touch on the touch points. That's exactly what Jamie and Rachel said. Again, it's just about how you use the different touch points to tell the same story, but different elements of it. How you take those elements and put them on the different marketing touch points as they may be.
I think a key element as well is that a bigger budget doesn't mean a better marketing strategy. I've seen it happen so often when they say, oh, I've got a huge budget, it's fine, let's chuck that at marketing. And like Rachel says, you chuck it into a giant pit, and instead of having a tenth of the budget or even 100th of the budget, and doing exactly what Hayden says and saying, okay, actually spend it correctly, so you can track the data and the optics of every pound and how much that's bringing back on top. And if it's not, as Rachel said, change it. There's a reason why that is not bringing in the money that it's supposed to be bringing in. And your marketing PR team, once again, will tell you if it's not bringing in the right amount, or if it is bringing 3 times or 4 times, or even if it's doubling. If your marketing and PR team are saying, look, that's a good trend at this point within the stage, then it's a good trend, and build on that. Don't feel like you put £10 in and you only get £30 worth of tickets. Don't feel like that's a bad thing. Think, you know what? Exactly, it's good. Like, and build on it. It's you're not going to throw £100 in a pit and get 10 grand back. Like, you're going to have to build on it, and build that audience. So it's not all about having money. to chuck at things. It is about spending it in the correct way.
It's a bit like what Hayden picked up on what I said, like, we don't want to be shouting at any point. It should be a conversation, right, Hayden? Like, we should be talking to people and they should be talking back to us in a way. If you're shouting, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
So I'm going to jump in here because I think there's been a question in the chat, which I was also just about to ask, but also I think Hayden's mentioned a really great point around the storytelling element, that a lot of people who might be watching this or who are our MMD, MTN members, or who might be building new musicals, you are storytellers. So, use that. You have created a world in which a musical now exists, which is incredible. That can translate through to everything you do. Keep telling that story. So there's been a chat question from one of our members, Danny McAvoy, who says, okay, but I don't have a marketing and PR department. So if you have limited time and limited resources, what do you think your most important points are? So I know that data and research are so essential, but I don't have a marketing and PR department. How do I find that? How do I build from nothing until I can get to a stage where I can bring one of you experts in to kind of support me?
Yeah, it's tricky. I've done it at the start of my career. I had to, like you said, you cannot afford, as great as Rachel and Hayden are, you cannot afford their bill. You can't afford to bring them on, so you literally have to do it yourself, and it's tough. It's tough because you are trying to pretend to be something you're not. You're trying to be an expert in something that you know nothing about, and you are just flying by the seat of your pants, trying to push and help. The only thing I can suggest is, one, if you firstly watch these kind of things, reach out to people like Rachel, Hayden, or myself, or other people who are a bit further up in their career. They will help you and guide you. They won't work for you, obviously, and join the contract, but they will try and give you tips and help. Everyone just does try to help each other in this industry. No one's going to swat you away. Secondly is, take a step back and just look at what you have got. You've got the three elements you've got are social media. Social media is such a big tool within marketing nowadays because, okay, yes, you have got paid advertising and Google track ads, but you can do it all for free. You can just put posts out. You can build your following on Instagram or Facebook or Snapchat or TikTok or whatever it is nowadays, and you can build that audience, and it's just a slow burner. But use your contacts, use the people that you know, use your circle, lean on them, because I'm sure a bunch of them will be at the start of their career as well. And also use your cast, use your team around you. They'll know that there's not a huge amount of money in the pot for this show, and they'll know that because it's a small show or it's a startup show or it's a development show, and get them to help promote it. I'm not asking them to say the kids version where they have to sell 50 seats to be in the production, but it's about the fact of ask them to push it, ask them to speak to their friends, their colleagues, whoever it is, and just get them down and make it a community feel of a show. Because when you're starting off as a producer, you end up being the producer, the marketer, the PR, that you end up being everything because you can't afford anyone. And it is a huge amount of strain when you're having to think about the finances, everyone's well-being, and everything else. It takes a huge toll, and that's why a lot of early career producers stop or go into something else, because they feel like they have to take the weight of everything when they don't have to. Talk to you have a circle for a reason. All your peers, Jane, reach out.
Just kind of, I guess, a more practical thought is, it goes back to what Hayden was saying about kind of being really consistent with what you're putting out there. So even if you can only commit to doing 2 posts a week, that's fine. Sit yourself down, use a scheduling tool like Hootsuite or something like TweetDeck, spend a couple of hours and just schedule the next few weeks. And then that's done, and it's out of your mind. You don't have to do it. If you know you can only commit to 1 newsletter a month, perfect. Just make sure you have that consistency, and don't try and give yourself too much to do, because you won't do as good a job. And as Jamie said, ask people to help. People, we love it. We work in this industry for a reason. So yeah.
I think a crucial one is be honest with yourself. Be honest with what your resource level will be. Be honest with how much you're willing to pay to get your word out there, and again, define what success is to you. Just by doing those things, you can understand, okay, honestly, if you don't like social media, you don't like using it, or you've got a hang up about posting. I know so many creators who don't like posting to social media, and they've got various different hang-ups. But it's about you reframing about why you're using it. And once you can actually frame and be clear about why you're using the platform, it makes it a lot easier for you to get your story out there. So those are the things I would say. And again, going back to having a vision, have a vision about what you're trying to talk about, and try not to use social media. I always say, like when you've got a friend or family member who comes to you when they want something, try not to be that person on social media where you're only going to them when you want to sell your show, because that's why people lock off and turn off from you. So it's that consistency, and content doesn't have to be difficult. My colleague Dean always says that our mobile phone is as powerful as the first camera that used to film Star Wars. It's the camera that used to film the first Star Wars. So imagine how much you can do with this mobile phone. So just always keep that in mind. It can be questions. It don't have to be images. It can be questions and stories. It can be repurposing content that's relevant to you. On TikTok, you can do things like duets, where you can do like I said, you can do a monologue and get someone else to monologue alongside you. There's so many different ways that you can engage and create content that's relevant to your space, and that you can maybe plan in advance. So again, it's just that planning, being clear on why you're on there, and being honest with what you're going to do resource-wise.
So sorry, I just have one more thing to add. I was going to just say, super great marketing tip that is free, PS swaps. It's another great way of identifying your market through somebody else's audiences. If you know you are going to be doing a musical about, oh my goodness, this testing me out. You've got a musical about London. So best thing to do is to email lots of London theatres, asking them if they want to do a PS swap with you. Essentially, you give them some copy for Twitter and an image, they post it for you, they'll send you one back, you post it for them. Another great way of not just shouting about your own work, but also whilst bringing new audiences in. That's fine. I'll stop now.
And for those who might not know what a PS swap is, it's also it could be that kind of end of the newsletter section. So you'll find that at the end of the newsletter, there'll be like a from our friends or from something else. Most other theatres, if you have a relationship with them or you're working with them, or other shows in the same theatre, if you're, for example, if you're Southwark Playhouse are fantastic at always having notes from our friends in the bottom of their newsletters, but they will also suggest, John and Jen's about to play, and so is Operation Mincemeat. You should promote each other. Here are our friends in the venue. Here are our friends next door. We're rehearsing together. And this is all content and things that you can get so easily on your phone, just immediately. Just take a snap and go from there.
And it does feel important, that shared support. I mean, we are such a small sector, really, and we always at MMD, we're always talking about how there is room for everything. There are so many diverse voices out there creating new work. Sharing and supporting that is I'm sure the way to go. I just wanted to bring us back for a moment to the whole notion of your market, and that sense of you've created your piece of work and you kind of have a sense who you think it might be for, but then there's also the kind of unlikely audience or the market that might find you. And I don't know if there's any more thoughts about how to work that out, how to work that through. Like we have a question from the floor about, is identifying my market partly to do with my market finding me? And sort of how you judge that balance, really, or what that journey can be. Any thoughts on that?
So yeah, again, depends on your. I know it's like a broken record, but it depends on what you're trying to achieve again. So if it really does depend on what you're trying to achieve. So let's say, as an example, you're trying to please funders. This is an example. So you're trying to please funders. Your audience might not necessarily be the funders themselves. It would be the results of what you're getting of your work. So your audience would be whoever your demographic is, predominantly who are going to like what you're doing and what you're talking about. Because the funders are going to know that, yes, when I put out a piece of work, I have this much impressions, or I have this much reach, or my content is enjoyed by this many people. You might be saying, okay, I need to be seen by Rachel specifically. I know Rachel's always on LinkedIn, so I'm going to start using LinkedIn because that's the kind of place where I can find people like Rachel, who does that kind of freelance kind of work. So it's just about you really thinking about what you're trying to achieve, and that will then build. If you're trying to build a community for yourself, for your work and for your online brand or your personal brand, then that's when you start to think about how you start to create content that not only educates or entertains or informs, but is relevant to the audience that you're trying to serve. So that's when it's social media then becomes not so much about you and about what you like. It's more than about what kind of things can I create that my audience will like, or that my audience will be educated from, but my audience will be entertained from.
And your audience might change. Like you might set up with a show as a goal and think it is at 12 to 19-year-olds. And as the show develops, as it grows, it may not be completely. And like what Rachel said earlier, is it's about, if that's not your bracket, figure it out and switch it. And then that your audience will find you and it will balance out, because your audience will come, you'll get your fledglings, your starters, and then they'll start telling their friends or their family or whoever their connections are, and that's how it grows. It's word of mouth. It's still huge. So it's about having that. People are going to trust the word of somebody they know a lot more than a tweet or a social ad, because it's the same with how products work. If you're buying a Hoover and your mum says, "Oh, it's the best Hoover I've ever owned," you're much more likely to go buy that than if an ad comes up on the screen and says it's the best Hoover you're ever going to own. So your audience will eventually evolve into what it should be and what it can be. But so technically that is them finding you, but it has to happen. That happens naturally, I'd say.
I would probably add to what you've both said is like, who feels similar to you? Who feels similar to your pitch? With your product, what venue do you see it being in? So if you feel like your product's super similar to Wicked, look at Wicked's marketing, look at what they do. I'm not saying copy it, but they're clearly getting it right. So don't be afraid to kind of use and take and share ideas. Also, in terms of venue, if you see your piece going into a studio space, very different than seeing it going to Broadway. So think about who those audiences are for your studio space naturally. And a lot of the time, your gut instinct will be right. It will.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I think the greatest lesson I've ever learnt in the musical theatre space ever is don't reinvent the wheel, because what works. And they say there's no such thing as an original idea anymore. Borrow it and repurpose it. So I think it'd be fun for me, at least, perhaps we can work through a little example in terms of a way we continue to ask questions. So say I'm one of the brilliant shows that are going to be showcased at Beam or through the Musical Theatre Spotlights program. And we had such a brilliant time. We heard like 320 different pitches in person across the country in 2019 and have selected 41 and 37 to kind of come through with us. Suggest we look at the one that's stuck in my head today. Say I've written a brand new musical about Scouts. So the Boy Scouts, and I hope David and Sam don't mind me dropping them in here. Say I've written this gorgeous musical about Scouts. It's got some actor muso elements. It's very fun. It's very light, but it's also got some really heartwarming numbers. I've now got this pitch pack that's got an interview with David and Sam. I've got 2 numbers. One's really fun and fast paced, and one's really kind of more emotive, but still very lighthearted. How would we perhaps step through getting them set up and kind of looking at it? So we would want to look for their audience, markets, channels. Does anyone want to kick off with some thoughts? Or have I put you on the spot too much, giving you homework?
Like for me, that probably wouldn't be a social media. Probably that wouldn't be something for social media. And from if I'm understanding what you're saying, that would be more about how you present your package and how you've reached out to the people who need to see it and getting that work in front of people. If you've got, it sounds like an EPK, so like an electronic press kit where you've got, and you're now trying to get it in front of the people to get it commissioned or to get it funded or something of that nature. That's a different situation to building a community. So that's you now thinking, okay, who are the people who are relevant? So again, you might think, okay, maybe you'll go on LinkedIn and you'll say, okay, let me see where the producers are, or what theatre management or whoever you may need to contact to see what their details are, what kind of things do they like, what kind of imagery they're like, similar to what Rachel was saying. What if does their theatre or does this space align with what the work I'm trying to do? those are the things that I would consider. I remember once I was working with a PR for an artist, a musician artist, and one of the things they said, which really stuck with me, they said, if you're trying to pitch for a new PR team who you really like, and they've got and they do really great work, do a photo shoot that aligns with the work they're already doing, and then go and speak to them, because then what you're just doing is you're just showing them that your mind, or you're akin to the work that they already like and that they already push. So it's just about you thinking about how you pitch that work. I'm not saying that you have to make it exactly like what, but so that it's aligned with the work that this company is already doing, or this producer's already doing, or that this theatre's already putting on.
Yeah, exactly that. Everyone has their kind of niche of what they like to do and what they put on. The Finborough produces, well, puts on a lot of different work than what you'd see at the Charing Cross, and the Charing Cross puts on work that's different than you might see at Theatre 503. So you've got to make sure that it aligns with their space. And the first thing I would do is, if you've got a musical about Scouts, I would reach out to the Scouts. I'd reach out to the organisation. Look, we have a musical about Scouts. They're big on PR, aren't they? I'm sure Bear Grylls would like some more publicity. Get Bear Grylls' face attached to it. I don't know. Just speak to your PR team and see if you can link with the Scouts, even in a way where it's kind of like years and years ago. I remember there was a musical called Ushers, and it was at the Charing Cross Theatre back in 2013, and it was a good musical. It was an absolutely fine musical. They did a short run at Charing Cross, but the smartest thing they ever did is they never tried to, well, from what I've seen, they've never really tried to push it professionally as a show, but every group of ushers around the country has performed that show on an amateur level. They've licensed it to every group of ushers, because there's every theatre in the country, because it's just about a bunch of ushers in the front of house of the theatre. So every amateur group in the country probably is made up of a few people who are working front of house, because so many amateur societies, and they want to be involved in theatre so much that their day job is working front of house in the theatre. So they go and license that show, put it on, and this was years ago, but I know about 4 years ago, I know they were making a killing off that for just amateur licensing it. So it's just about figuring out what you want to do with that show, and what's the end game of that product, and aligning it with that goal.
There you go. You heard it here first. David and Sam, go get it performed at all the Scout camps.
Oh, they've done very well. They linked up with the Scouts last summer. They did a Scouts convention moment. Yeah. So they're on it.
If you don't have something quite so tangible to tie your show or your story or your product to, where else could you look for that kind of inspiration and people to connect to? So we've done venues, we've done What's My Show About? Where else would you look if it wasn't in those places?
I think from a producer point of view, the first step is to figure out whether you want it to be a commercial show or a subsidised show, which route you want to go. Is it there to make money and solely make money, which is not, I feel like commerciality in the industry is sometimes seen as a dirty word, because it's about the art form, it's about creating art, and we're in this for the love of the industry and the art. We're not here to make money, but you should never shy away if that is there to design to make money, so that you can put that money in a part, so you can do that project that you want to do and pay for a show that's not going to make money. Then fine, do what you want to do. So that's step one, is figuring out, is it there to make money, or is it there to be showcased and tell a story of a voice that needs to be heard, or whatever it might be. Figure that out to start with. Then it splits, because there are certain theatres that are better for subsidised work, and there's certain producers that are better for subsidised work, and there are better theatres and producers that are better for commercial work. So, because if you went to, I don't know, I'm trying to think, Kenny Wax, and said, I've got this show, but it's a subsidised piece, it's not going to really be for him. Most of his work is commercial. So you want to make sure that you're approaching the people that it's there for, because otherwise you're just going to be wasting your time, because they're probably either not going to return your calls because you haven't looked at their body of work, like Hayden said, and you haven't aligned yourself with what they're doing to make sure that your work matches up with theirs. So it's just figuring out what you want it to be, and there's no wrong answer to that, but it's about researching, looking at it, and go to the Dream sites, the Dream Theatre, go on their websites and go and have a look at the dream theatres you want that show to go to, and look at the archive of all the shows that have been there previously, and don't just look at who the producers are, but look at who the production assistants are, look at who the assistant producers are, because for all you know, that show could have been 4 years ago, and that assistant producer on a show at the Donmar could now be producing a show at the Finborough. So, or they could be back staff at the Royal Court for all you know now, but you know that show was the same ilk of your show, so you're just matching it up. It's about those little cards when you're a kid, matching up the same symbols.
Great, yes, thank you. This might be a Jamie question as well, actually, a question we've had through about how much you change things if you are specifically going for a producer, if you've kind of gone, actually, I've got all my marketing, I'm aware of my audience, but actually I've got a very specific ask. And so the question is, marketing your musical to producers, can social media be used for that? Is that acceptable? Could you direct message? You know, are emails better? What's a good way? And I guess parallel with that is a question we're often asked as well about, how do you reach an artistic director? So that those very specific asks or goals. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah. So the artistic director one. So when I was at the Barn, so I worked as my title was the producer, but I was the equivalent of kind of an executive director, but I was the gatekeeper to the artistic director. So anyone who wanted to get hold of Yuan, anyone who wanted to, so I co-programmed the theatre with Yuan, but anyone who wanted to get to him kind of went through me first. So if you want to get hold of the artistic director of a theatre, don't go after them directly. Have a look at their circle around them. It's kind of trying to enter into a company, but then instead of messaging the recruitment team, you're emailing the CEO. You need to figure out who is around that theatre and message people who might have worked there previously and to say, look, how did the strings work within that space? Who's the best person who's going to reply? That may be someone in box office. It could be someone who's front of house. It could be anyone within that circle who just has the ear of the artistic director and is able to sort something out for you. Secondly, approaching a producer about your work, it's tricky because as a producer, you get approached a lot, and you do get approached via social media, you do get approached via LinkedIn, via everything, absolutely everything. And there's no right or wrong way about it. The easiest and best way is to go about it by sending an email. If anyone sent me a message or sends me a message on social media, I always say back to them and say, look, great, I'm happy to hear more. Could you just email me it all in detail? Because when I'm going on my social media, I usually look at my phone when I'm going out the office to grab a coffee, or I'm sitting on a train and I don't have time to look at a pitch in that moment. So in honesty, so I don't forget, email it to me. So when I sit back at my desk, I can listen to it. I can actually watch it on a big screen. I don't want to watch it on my phone. And to get a producer to be engaged in your work and to attach yourself to your work, there's no right or wrong answer to that either, because of the fact that every producer has a string of content or a string of shows that they've got lined up. So, and I'm sure Rachel and Hayden are the same, where it's not just the shows they're working on right now, they're going to be booked for next year. They're going to be talking about shows. What's the marketing plan for the show in June 2022? Or what's the plan? What this show opens in October 2023? We need to start building that momentum now. So a lot of producers don't actually have time in their diary for another year or so. Like our next slot is probably maybe July, autumn next year, the earliest, for us to actually take any new work on. So it's not the fact of, it's not a no, it's a maybe down the line. But the easiest way to bring a producer on board, because a producer always gets asked, look, I've got a show, because what they're technically asking you for is money, is the crux of it. They're kind of messaging you saying, hey, yeah, you're great, but kind of I want you to pay for my show, which is fine, because that's kind of what a producer is there to do. But the best approaches I've ever had are ones where people message me or email us and say, look, we've got this show, it's X, we think we want it on this kind of scale, or we want you to work on it with us. We have worked or fundraised or built, or we've got this bit of cash. Like it shows that they aren't just emailing 30 people saying, give us money, please. It's about saying, look, we have grafted, we have put work, we have either got the rights, we secured a rights deal, or whatever it might be. And then the people who actually get the best, the most response or the best success rate are usually creatives who've ended up securing the rights to something because they've already talked to the agent, spoken to them, or put out some feelers, and maybe even attached a leading actor to it and said, look, I've got this person, I've got the potential person on pencil, I've got this maybe venue or whatever it is. It's just showing they're putting the graft in, rather than it's, look, please can we have some money? That's a long-winded answer, but it's there's no, yeah, it's hard.
And it's really important to reiterate that all of this stuff takes work. You know, yeah. It's kind of gone are the days where you go, I've made something and it's wonderful, and now the world is going to pick it up. You know, I think particularly that advice around getting to the people you want to get to by the people that are around them, and doing the research, understanding who's attached to which projects and why, and you know, all of that feeds your work in the end, doesn't it? And how it's going to get out there, because you work out how to articulate what it is that you're doing by learning from other people.
Thank you. Go on, sorry.
I was just going to say there's so many phenomenal pieces of work out there that aren't being put on because there just isn't enough finance available to put them all on, and there's just not enough hours or theatres available to put them on. So it's just time, really. It is about finding the right thing at the right time. But yeah. And
again, let's go back to that. Only talk to people when you want something. If it's about trying to build networks and trying to build relationships. I know again it might sound like a cliche sentence or cliche, but if you know there's a producer that you want to work with in the future, engage with them beforehand. And I don't mean as in a week before you want to go pitch to them. Engage with them beforehand and start to try to build those connections with them, so that there's an actual conversation piece. You can actually say, oh, just wondering, do you mind if I email you about XYZ, or because I've got this coming up again. If you've had genuine dialogue, or you've been following them for a while and you've been commenting back and forth for each other, if you approach them in a professional manner, they're more likely to say, okay, yeah, give it a look, because you've built a relationship and you haven't just come off almost like a cold call. You haven't come out as a cold call and said, okay, can I send you something now? So build relationships with these people. Everybody has egos, like everybody. So if you see somebody you like their work, just tell them, I really love your work. Been following you for XYZ. That could be the gateway to the start of a conversation. They might DM you back and you can ask a question and leave it at that. When you network with people, it doesn't mean you have to make and work with them that day or tomorrow. Think about that long-term process.
Yeah, that's a huge point. Huge point. The amount of the success rate is so much higher for people who you've built a relationship with, or even if it's, look, I'd love to grab a coffee. I can grab a coffee for 20 minutes, fine, absolutely fine. But I could do one of them every day. I've got no issue doing that. But it's more about if they stay in connection, or like I said, come to your show or whatever it might be and support your work. And I end up supporting their work. And it's just about that balance. And yeah, thinking of it, actually, the amount of shows I've produced that have been through that, which I haven't even realized, because psychologically they've just linked up. And then 2 years later, they've messaged me about a show. I'm like, yeah, of course I'll do it for you. So yeah, it's huge.
I think that's really great in terms of then looking at how we grab people's attention. So we've also mentioned touch points, and a rule, certainly when I was working in Australia and marketing musicals, I always followed a rule of it took about 3 touch points to convert someone to buy a ticket to my show. I think now we're talking it's about 100 million touch points, but to kind of flip to the kind of social media angles and so on, is there both an etiquette but also a process in terms of trying to get people's attention? Can I post my video or my photos and tag people? Will I use hashtags? How will we get the attention of people other than professionally sliding into their DMs? So there are other ways that we can reach audiences, be it people who might fund us or work with us, or ticket buyers, or just people who should know, and to build that traffic.
From a social point of view, definitely. Again, create the content that you know that those people seem to like or seem to be drawn towards. Be consistent in your messaging. You can use hashtags to get content in front of people. I often use ads if I'm going to do something like that, so you can be quite specific with your ads with the audiences you're trying to target. So if you know, and it doesn't have to be a lot of money. If you know, for example, you're trying to reach producers who like a certain type of topic, and they tend to work in different spaces, or they tend to work at this type of theatre, you can literally create an audience for that on a free ad, and just put £5 a week on your best post that's relevant to that community, and just keep posting it to that. So start, just little things like that will get you in their presence without you having to go in to see them, and they'll just subconsciously see your work. So from a social point of view, that's the things you can do. Follow hashtags. If you follow certain hashtags, so you can see the work or the communities that are relevant to those hashtags, that's another way you can see what's happening, and you can engage with those communities accordingly. And then I suppose finally, you can tag people, but I mean, I don't personally have an issue with it, but if you're going to tag someone, make sure that the work is super relevant to what they're doing. You're not just tagging people for tagging people's sake. It has to be perfectly aligned with what they're doing. It has to be something that would be of interest to them, and preferably interest to their community in the first place, so that for them to want to share it. An example is when I work with a lot of musicians. So we did a project. One artist I was working with wanted to be sponsored by Fila. That was just a goal for them. So what we did is we did loads of photo shoots, and we bought loads of Fila gear, took it back, and then we did loads of photos, and then posted lots of images of it. Fila started to take his content and post it on their pages, and then eventually we got a brand deal with them. That took us about 3 months, just because we just thought it through. So it wasn't incredibly long. So it's just about you thinking about these things and just making sure that it's super relevant if you're going to go down a tagging route.
Yeah, I think there's a delicate balance, especially if you're tagging individuals, not corporations, between making it relevant and making it social and spam. Right? And then you end up getting tagged. I've had it before where I've been tagged one every day for a week on the same show on a social media post. By the end of it, it's not the fact I don't want to see it. It's like I ignore it, because it's just I'm like, oh, it's that daily bloody post again that I'm apparently in, which I've got nothing to do with me.
I mean, we get them. It's clear our audience as Mercury Musical Developments and Musical Theatre Network is new musicals across the United Kingdom. New musicals. We do get people who keep tagging us in things like My Night at the Movie Musicals, which is, I love to know about it, but it's not something that I am going to retweet because it's not relevant to my audience. I love to know still, so I still like to know. So I'm not saying don't, tag people and not get involved, but it sounds like the answer is do your research, be nice, and also ask for help. Because I mean, I guess all anyone can ever say is no. Yeah. Then you're not going to get in trouble, but be nice, do your research, ask for help.
Yeah, and I would say be personal with every approach. It's like that whole thing behind, you don't just send the same CV off to every job. Don't send the same pitch off to every person. Get to know them. And when we're talking about who we're tagging or like personal identities, your identity as a person is different to your identity as a show. So that person's identity as a producer is a different identity to them when they're not producing. There's a professional as a personal, and I think it's really just finding the right balance and working out whether you're talking professional to professional or person to person, and trying not to kind of cut between the two. Yeah. I think it's quite important.
And I think just taking your time with it as well. Take a breath and just proofread it. The amount of times that I've been sent,
always proofread.
Or
oh my God,
I've
always
sent,
proofread.
Oh my God, Rachel and I've worked together on a few things. Yep, always proofread. But the amount of times that I've either in my pitching hat kind of sent the wrong thing to the wrong person, put the wrong name or email, or just hit forward and I haven't finished editing the forward. No one responded to that email, and I haven't meant to, and I've sent an apology, and everyone knows, but be nice and take a moment. Probably don't print out an email and mail it to me. It's kind of been written for someone else. Like, that's not going to work for me. Talk to me as a person, but also as a professional. You're right, Rachel.
I think what Rachel said is a good point, especially what I can only assume is different with producers. Look at their page. If their page is a personal page and it's about their friends and family, not about their shows, then tagging them is probably not going to be the best place on. But then if you see them on LinkedIn, for example, where they are talking about their work, then maybe there'll be a relevance. So again, there is just doing that research and making sure that you're tagging the right people. And again, like Rachel said, it's different with brands. So for example, I know for example with ASOS, if you tag ASOS, they've got a massive wall in ASOS where they see everything that's been tagged with their name on it. So they've got a massive social media wall. So they actually like that kind of stuff because they can see what people are saying about it, and then if they like the person, they will pick them up. But with an individual, that's obviously a different scenario. So just really think about what you're doing and why you're doing it.
I think just on that point, we can't stress enough, I know Hayden, hopefully you'll agree with me, how useful LinkedIn is as a tool. Don't underestimate it for prospecting, finding those people that you want, finding the information that you want about them. And the great thing is it's a professional platform, so everything you're finding is of that professional standard. It's not like you've gone on Facebook and you've typed in their name and then maybe you've seen some pictures of when they went on holiday, and you're not going to accidentally say that in a conversation. It'll look really creepy. LinkedIn is great. Use it. It can be your best friend.
And it can, LinkedIn is huge for funding, huge for funding. There's one producer, I won't name her, but there's one producer I know who it religiously funds all of her productions through LinkedIn. And at a guess, an absolute guess, and this is somebody who's only been producing for 18 months, maybe less. And at a guess, from what I know she's working on, I guess I would say that she's probably raised maybe 150,000 pounds worth of investment through LinkedIn. Like it's so beneficial, so beneficial. So
remember we were saying before, when you can try and find that circle on LinkedIn, that's really a lot easier to do, because it'll normally say people look for this person, or people who works at this organization, other people work at this other organization. So you can really go down that rabbit hole of, okay, I need to talk to Jamie, and Jamie knows Rachel, and Rachel knows Ellen, and Ellen, etc., etc. You can see the connections a lot easier.
I mean, not to toot my own horn, but everyone on this panel has worked with me in some form. But it's about drawing on your personal connections. And I know I did just say, don't tag me in irrelevant things, but I say now directly to our MMD and MTN members, you definitely should be tagging MMD and MTN. That's our job, to promote the work of New British Musicals, to promote the work of our members, to know what's going on. So in that sense, where it is the company account, absolutely slide into the MTN DMs and tell me about your show. Probably don't slide into my personal DMs and tell me about your show. You can, but if I don't respond, it's not because it's because that's my personal Twitter, where I also talk about public transport and, burnt toast and things. But do absolutely tag MMD and MTN to tell us what's going on, so we can spread your message as well.
Let's see Daniel's question. I don't know. Is it effective to keep people up to date with your progress? I'm a believer in yes for this. But it can be, it depends on the individual. I believe yes, because what I think can happen is that even if they don't respond, if they haven't told you no, don't email them anymore about this, or don't, then they're seeing it. And what it can mean is then when something opportunity comes up, you're still kind of in front of mind. And then again, it goes back to the way you use social media again. There's many industry people that some of the people I've worked with is connected with, because they've just kept them in touch, and the industry person started off talking to them, then they've gone cold, but then every now and then they'd be like, okay, by the way, just to let you know, I've just dropped this new project, it's done this XYZ, and they might have ignored it, but then literally 6 months later they say, oh, I've got a project for you, because I've been keeping up to date, I've been seeing what you're doing. So if you've got those relationships, I 100% would. Maybe
don't add us on Facebook. But, professionally, and again, unless someone has said, don't contact me, you can, but I think there should also be a bit of a, your temperature hot to cold rating. So in fundraising, we'll always talk about keeping a lead warm, or keeping someone warm and kind of interested. I do think, though, that if you get nonstop, no response, cold, like this person, if you would approach them as ice cold, eventually you should also save your energy and move to people who are interested. If you're not getting a response, you could be doing it wrong. Now, let's say you got the wrong email. Save your energy for those who are really engaged, because you're then also going to get the best connections and the best support from those people.
I would say this is where you could potentially look at setting yourself up with a free MailChimp account and asking those people, do you want to stay up to date with what I'm doing? I'll email you once a month. And you literally create an address book on there that is professional, call it professional contacts. Email them once a month, just saying, hi, hope you're doing well. here's what I've been up to. And then maybe as part of that go, and here's some cool stuff I've seen in the last month. I really enjoyed this. Did you see it? That kind of thing. Just create a conversation. It's not all about you. It's about other things that you're interested in the industry. So even if they're not interested in what you're currently pitching to them or what you're currently working on, if they can see your other interests, then you're going to spring to their mind when they're working on one of their next projects. But yeah, mailing lists, just promise them you're not going to spam them, and then really don't spam them, because they will unsubscribe and it hurts. Yeah,
it's because I like it when people message me and say, oh, I've got this show, the plan is to workshop it, and we're gonna do a little workshop in our living room with friends, and we'll talk that through. But when we get to the stage of doing it in front of some guests, we'd love for you to be there. It's like, yeah, great, of course. And then 2 months later, if they message you again saying, oh, just so you know, the workshop with the friends, it went really great, we came up with some really cool new ideas. Like, yeah, brilliant, perfect. It's just nice back and forth, instead of saying, because I think, like I said, Hayden hit the nail so on the head, where it's just a lot of the first communication is, can I have money, please? And it's like, no, sorry, it's not, we don't, producers don't sit there with a bag full of cash thinking, oh, I can't wait for the next person to message me about it. It's building that rapport and building that back and forth. And then by the time it gets to that workshop, because the amount of workshops we get invited to as well, where it's like 2 days away, and you know that it's okay. Yeah, some scenarios it might be the sense that they've only just been able to book a venue, or they may have just. Sometimes I get that, I do get that. But if they'd built that rapport 3 months earlier, saying, "Oh, we're going to do it," it might be last minute, the invite, just because of availability and rehearsals. It may just be a last minute invite. I hope that's okay. Then at least you know it's coming up. The further you get, then you can actually have time to put it in your diary, because even a lot of producers, they do theatres work, and I do want to have a night in at home. I do. So workshops better in the day, which is really weird, but it's better to do them in the daytime, because that's my working day, rather than if I have to go somewhere at 7:30 at night. I kind of want to go home, have dinner, crack open a beer and sit on the sofa, if I'm honest. So it's about timing as well, and just thinking that follow what other people are doing as well.
Might be a bit off piste, but I was thinking about when you're approaching producers or venues, look at what in-kind support they offer rather than going straight in for the money. Yeah. If they will turn around to you and say, we can give you rehearsal space for 2 hours each day for a week, but you have to do a sharing at the end, that's a great opportunity. Not only is it free rehearsal space, it gets you in the building, and it gets you to know who else is in the building. And I don't just mean staff-wise, I mean audiences. Are people using the cafe in the daytime? What do those people look like? Is your show something that you think they would enjoy? Use those in-kind opportunities, and never underestimate the power of a creative learning department. If you've got a new piece that you've workshopped and you want to give it to some people who are going to have a go at a scene and hit the ground running with it, offer it to them for free for a creative learning performance. Again, you've got your work in the building, even if it's not in that traditional on-stage sense. Sorry, I did say it was off piste.
I think that's it picks up so perfectly on both your earlier kind of suggestion about the PS swap, can we swap and can we support each other, is very much a starting point, and it's building those relationships. And something that also was mentioned in our first panel around the idea of giving people a bit of more of a cherry, in terms of what Jamie was saying about don't overwhelm them, don't spam them, but also don't send them the script, develop like a 1-page pitch pack, keep them up to date with little morsels. Because if I come back and say, oh, do you have a video? Can I see it? You're building a connection there, rather than here's my script, do you have time to read it? No, it's laundry night, I do not have time, and building on that.
Yeah, just quickly touching on Rachel with it. There's a method that we've done, I don't know, 15, 20, 30 times, and it works every time, and it's phenomenal. You approach a venue and you say, look, we want to workshop this new piece of writing, because that's the hardest part, right? Is getting it off the ground, is building it and actually getting it to a point where you can employ these fantastic human beings who are in my screen there and there. So until you get to that point, you need to save every penny you can. So what we do even now, we approach venues that we want to work with or collaborate with, and we say, look, we want to workshop this for a week. We want a week's worth of workshop, and we would love to use your space for it, and then do an invited guest workshop at the end, obviously free. We're not going to ask people to pay for this. So what we want is if we can get a week's worth of rehearsal space, and in return, we'll give you a percentage of that show and the future life of that show. You have a royalty on that show. All of a sudden, that venue is always invested in that production. Whether if they do it, I promise you, they will offer you a run at their venue if they like it, because now all of a sudden they've got money in the game. They've got skin in the game, where if you're offering them 1% of all future royalties of that work, or 2%, or whatever it might be, then if it goes well, they're going to see a lot of money in the future. So it's about working together. And if you have to, it's like if you had a company and you bring investors in early days, they have more skin in the game, so they're going to be more invested in it. Same works with a production and a theatre. Use it.
Absolutely, very, very good advice. And just thinking as well in terms of those connections with creative learning departments. Also, we often talk about how connecting with higher education institutions, with colleges, with students can just give people, writers, an opportunity to get their work workshopped. It might be the first stage, but that's fine. That sense of relationships, looking for so many different relationships, really, because it might just be that whatever you're creating absolutely fits a certain cohort of students, or a certain feel of a drama school or a musical theatre department who are really wanting to investigate something. And then you have that opportunity to just take your work a bit forward, share something, and then be able to invite the people you want to see a first go at it. And I also think another thing that's just been coming up in the conversation is this element of how long it can take to develop a musical. We all know that, particularly a new musical, it's a massive collaborative, potentially years-long venture. And actually the people you're going to be working with, it's a long old relationship. And part of our discussion last time was around how it's really important that you build relationships, and that you're a good and useful and interesting and open person to work with, because you're starting a relationship that could go on for many years. So that mixing the personal and the professional and getting that balance right is so useful. Sorry, Rachel.
I was just going to add on to your great point about schools and higher education and any educational institute. If you get that relationship right and you end up having your show at a bigger theatre, that can really be, in terms of ticket sales, a bit of a golden goose. So create those relationships, nurture those relationships, get to know which teachers you need to talk to. If they're moving on, send them a goodbye gift, send the new teacher a hello gift, like all of these little things that make them feel like you're part of their teaching journey, or part of their staff team in a sense. It helps. And also they're just really nice relationships to have,
And I think for those who are sitting here going, oh, well, I have no time or resources, and how do I do all this? One of the key ways that I know a lot of our members, or for people who are developing new musicals, will get their funding initially for workshop and development time is for applying for Arts Council project grants. So if you're familiar with this space, you'll know that they're moving to the 10-year Let's Create strategy, which does ask, can you involve more young people? There is a public participation element. Working with young people, working with schools and higher education networks is never going to be a bad thing in terms of ticket sales, networking, meeting people. The other feedback we get in the musical theatre network side of things, we do a lot of work with the higher education network, and the way that they talk about their students getting the opportunity to work with writers, give that feedback, get in the room, as well as also be the first people to play with work and to be like, I'm devising that character, is so invaluable. It's free for you. It's fantastic for them. I mean, I'm getting a great sense of do your research and be nice is the key points in these calls, but it really does pay off.
Can we sort of pick up on a question that's come through, but also is, I guess, slightly pandemic related as well, that, the world as we know it has shifted. And I think it'd be really interesting to hear from the panel how things have changed for you and how you see things going forwards. But sort of within that, also this question around if people are sharing things at different parts of the country, is there going to be an expectation that every showing will also be filmed so that people can watch it online? That kind of relationship between the digital interactions and the human real life interactions. It'd be interesting to hear your take on what we think it's going to be like going forwards, or what we should be thinking about.
Yeah, well, yes. So obviously the question was about obviously going to the West Country, isn't it? And talking about would we travel there? And yes and no. Well, yes, in the sense of if I was planning to go over that way, then yeah, if I'm over there, you're actually more likely for me to go see it, because I'm actually looking for activities to do when I'm there, and I enjoy watching theatre. I may be going with my family, but in the sense of, so I might not be able to want to talk business directly afterwards, because I might be with friends or family, whoever I've gone on the trip with. So I would happily have a discussion afterwards. But and then the way to, if I'm not going over that way, the way to get somebody there, and I've had it before. Somebody once flew me to Dublin, and it's fine. It was great, and I had I left at 10 a.m. watched the show and came back that night, and it was fine, and they paid for me to go, and I was happy to go, but it wasn't a show for me. So that's a risk that you're taking. But with the digital world that we're in, you can just record it and send it over, and if there's a piece that I'm interested in, I'll watch it if it is something that's more relevant to me. And then once you've got me on the hook on that, once I've seen it, the video content of it, then I might come out and see you, because it's something that I'm invested in, and I'm happy to travel that way to do it. But with the digital world moving forward, this is the new world. And I think even with COVID, obviously, will eventually calm down, and it hopefully will plateau out and things will go back to normal. But I think meetings will carry on like this, pitches will carry on like this. There'll be so much more in this fashion, which you can save a lot of money on. So you don't need to travel in to London every day. You don't have to live in London to have these conversations. I lived in Cirencester in the Cotswolds for 3 years, and it was a nightmare meeting up with people all the time. And every time I went to London, because it would cost an arm and a leg to get there. I was only there for one or two meetings, and I had to go bloody back. So I just wasted a day on 2 hour. It wasn't wasted, but I had 2 1-hour meetings and that was my day because of the travel. But now I wouldn't even hesitate to say, well, I'm going to do them over Zoom. So use it.
I would probably add to that by saying, in terms of from a totally marketing point of view and an audience psyche, at that point you are having to consider your producers, you're invited as audience. So people have a preference. Some people will specifically want to come see you in person and live. Some people will want a live Zoom, and some people will appreciate a recorded Zoom session. So I think kind of threefold. I know it seems like a lot of options, but even if you're setting up your iPhone at the back of the room on a £5 tripod and you're recording that session, if you can do it, because some people will think, oh, exciting, at 4:30 I'm going to watch 20 minutes of this brand new musical, I can't wait, and that's a point in their day, and that's a nice moment for them. Other people will have to do the school run, and they'll need to watch it at 9 p.m. once they've got the kids to bed. My other point is that I also would not underestimate, now that a lot of people are doing remote working, as to where everybody is based. I am currently working with a team where I am the only London-based person. Everyone else is spread across. I know that I've done contracts over lockdown where I've never actually met people in person, but we've still managed to do an entire show. So it's not as London-centric as it once was. So fear not.
I mean, I think, you know, the thing that we've responded to as MMD and MTN is, you know, last year we got to go to NEPT, we got to go to the National Alliance of Musical Theatre Festival and Conference in New York from our bedrooms. And it was amazing, from our kitchens, from our lounge rooms. And so I know that one of the things we've considered for Beam this year, and also for the Song Prize, is that we've tried to offer all these options in terms of, you can come in person if you're comfortable. You can watch live streamed. You can watch on demand live streams. And then all the wording gets confusing, but you can watch online, you can watch on demand, you can watch as it's happening. I mean, I think also recording is a great practice, because if we're these busy people, we might forget. We might forget, you know, what was the bit we loved? Do we want to hear it again? And you want to have a second opinion? And some producers might go, do you know what? I just want to hear that again. If you've got a recording, if we get into great practice of recording, it can then eventually become social media content again. So it's this beautiful self-fulfilling cycle of, you could post little snippets, you can take screen grabs to go, here's an image from our workshop. It's all useful. I don't think there's ever going to be a scenario where recordings aren't useful. You'll want to look back and get your feedback of what you thought worked.
I would just say on that point as well, in terms of accessibility, it's a fantastic thing to be able to offer people the option of seeing something without having to physically get there. The pandemic, as hard as it has been, and the kind of increase in digital theatre has seen a massive increase in people who wouldn't be able to access live theatre easily or at all, actually engaging with the art form. So I think just in terms of what you can do, I think it's a great thing if you can.
And I mean, my hot tip in that space around accessibility as well is that when you upload a video to YouTube, private, public, anything, YouTube will automatically generate some captions for you. You can then go through and just correct them and make sure everything's correct and is perhaps correctly capitalized and named. You've got to check them. I worked for the National Rural Touring Forum last year, and I can't tell you how many different strange spellings I had. Or when you say an acronym, so if I say MMD, it's definitely going to write MC, like EMECCE. Like, it's not going to pick it up correctly, but it saves you some time. It's accessible. It means people will pick up the nuances of your lyrics and your content in your book as well. It's never a bad idea. Who's got a final hot tip or anything? I feel like we've talked about so much, and it's been so valuable for our panelists. We've talked on producing, marketing, strategy, content, and we've rushed through it at such a fantastic speed. Does anyone have anything that they feel they haven't said yet that they could offer, or like their favorite top tip? If you could only do this one or two things, these are the things you'd do, you'd send people away to do. Bearing in mind that most people watching will want a marketing and a PR team, but may not have one. We do wish we could all have, you know, the 5, 6 of us on this panel just sitting in the background advising you all, but if you didn't.
I would say, from me, the last thing is with the digital world, you'll find a lot of people are recording or doing digital versions of their production, but they're treating it as if it's a stage version, or vice versa, where people are doing, they're turning something that a play or a script into a film or a short TV show as such, and then trying to get that onto the stage. And it's just, be very conscious, if you are going down the digital route, of what you want the next route to be. Bless you, Hayden. What you want the next step to be. Do you want it to be a digital only production, or is it there to be on stage afterwards? So it's just figuring out which route you want to be. And there's no wrong answer. It's just, which one do you want it to be?
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, digital, doing hybrid work doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be, okay, because I'm doing the show now, I have to have a video version of it. It can be, what's the supporting content? Could it be, digital side might be, we'll do an interview with the cast afterwards, or the director afterwards, or it might be. So you just think about the digital side of it doesn't necessarily mean the production has to be seen. It's the supporting content. It's that what makes the story go further afterwards.
Yeah,
I would heavily recommend plan. Sit yourself down for half a day with an Excel spreadsheet and plot what you're going to do. Make a little tab for marketing and go, "It's everything I want to do. It's the dates I want to do it on." And just touching on that idea of, just because you said something's hybrid, it doesn't have to be X, Y, Z. Just because you're going to do something digital doesn't mean it has to be such and such. It doesn't. But know now that there are way more options for what your product can be. So, for example, one of the contracts I work on, they will do a live staged streaming, and then a certain amount of time afterwards, they would release that as an on-demand version whilst booking in a UK tour of the stage version. Like, in terms of, from a completely marketing and my entire job is to make money point of view, there are so many more strands now that you can go down. But again, be authentic. If it's not meant to be live on stage, that's fine. if it's meant to be entirely digital, perfect. Yeah.
Brilliant. Very, very good advice. And I think in that kind of, in this new world where there is so much content online and there's so much going on, and also I know in terms of our members, there's been an awful lot of creative work going on in the last year in the pandemic. You know, lots of people have managed to finish that song cycle, write that musical. So there feels like there's a lot of produce being made, which is a wonderful, wonderful thing. And every time, I guess we're going to come back to that thing of there's a massive world out there. There are so many possibilities, but that telling your own story, that authenticity, that research around what it is, where it fits, what you want it to be, will always, you know, that'll always be the thing we come back to, that it's your story, it's your piece, you know it better than anyone. And, you know, thank you enormously, panel, for all that advice you've given, and some really, really practical tips on how we go about getting those pitches out there into the right people in the right way, and always remembering it's an ongoing, evolving, organic conversation that we're wanting to do, and it's tough along the way. You know, there are always going to be kickbacks, setbacks, all the rest of it, but we, you know, we're creative beings, we keep going, don't we? That's we're in it because we love it, and we all have those stories to tell. So a big thank you to our audience, and a massive thank you to Rachel, Jamie and Hayden. This, I think, will run and run. I know there are going to be people that we're going to be saying, come and listen to these guys, you know, in months to come. We'll be going, just refer back to that panel if you've got questions. Have a listen. So we really value your expertise and your time, and a big thank you and goodbye from all of us. You know, our next big MMD MTN event is Beam, online and in person, 10th of September. Please come if you can. And if you can't be there, you can watch it all through September. It'll be on demand. So, you know, our new hybrid world offers it up. So that'll be, well, and along with Beam, we're also doing the Stars and Drew Song Prize. So over the day of the 10th of September, we will be offering up music and songs from 50 new musicals. So if you can't find something in there that you get excited by, I'd challenge you.
If you can't be there in person, you can watch live with us as well. So you can still get involved. We'll have a live stream host going. We'll have social media moments. We'll have some Twitter and some hashtags. If you would like to book or to attend Beam, we do recommend that you book now. Early bird pricing is available until the 10th of August. If you are a member, you have been emailed your exclusive member discount codes. And if you would like to see these pictures, keep an eye on the hashtag Musical Theatre Spotlights online in all the places where MMD and MTN post and do things. They'll also be included in all of the digital packs and attendance for Beam. So if you book to attend Beam, you'll get to see all these pictures that we keep talking about. But thank you everyone for joining us on your Thursday evening. Have a lovely day and a lovely weekend. Bye for now,
We'll see you
everyone.
again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.